All right, well, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, whatever time it is that you're watching this, to the Terrible Tendy Fantasy Football League. This is your commish, and as we do every week, we're going to do some errands. And while we do those errands, we're going to talk a little fantasy football. So, I'm heading out right now. I'm going to go deliver off another package here, and then heading up to the grocery store. I've got some cans and bottles we got to recycle, so we're going to do that here a little bit, but why don't we go ahead and kick things off. So week 4 this week of fantasy football, and the first matchup we're going to look at here is Chicago Guns and Jesus Teats MD. Chicago Guns losing this week, only scoring 90.8 points. Jesus Teats MD getting the win, 102.5 points. So let's go ahead and start with Chicago Guns. Now, last week we talked about how Chicago Guns benched Jordan Howard because he wasn't sure if he was going to be playing or not, and turned out he did, had a great game. So what does he do? Of course, he puts him back in. Now, Jordan Howard this season so far is averaging around 13.3 points. He finished just under that average. Excuse me, his average is over that. That's what he finished with, 13.3 points. Only averaged 2.9 yards per carry, so it wasn't a great performance. Finished 53 yards, did get a touchdown that you're watching here. But yeah, not an overall great performance for Howard. Now on to his quarterback position. Jared Goff continues to have a great start to this season. So far, he's thrown 7 touchdowns with 1 pick this entire season. So, I mean, great season so far for Jared Goff. Finished the game 255 yards, 2 touchdowns for 18.9 points. So really good job there out of Jared Goff. He continues to have a great season. Now we're going to talk a lot this entire week. If you didn't get a chance to see the Texans, holy shit, they just blew up this week. They scored something like 50 points, 48 points. It was a bunch of fucking points. And so we're going to talk a lot about their different players. So we're going to kick it off here. The first Houston Texan player so far this week, we're going to start with DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins had a huge game. Now, I think he's had 7 catches each of the last 3 weeks. And this week, he blew that out. He had 10 catches, 107 yards with a touchdown, 22.7 points. So really nice week out of DeAndre Hopkins. But of course, we do have to talk about one thing for Chicago Guns. The stalwart on his team, the man who makes everything happen, this guy right here, Julio Jones. You saw him leave, I believe, in the second quarter with a hip injury. Looks like he'll be okay. Fortunately for Atlanta and for Chicago Guns, they're on a bye week coming up this week, so couldn't have had a better time for that to happen, to have an injury as right as you're entering into a bye week. So we'll see where he's at after a couple of weeks of time off and see if he can get better. So much for Chicago Guns. Let's go ahead and jump over now to Jesus Teats MD, the winner. Now, last week, Cam Newton had 3 interceptions. He had a piss-poor game. So, of course, worried about it this week, Jesus Teats decided he's going to bench Cam Newton and instead start Mark Ingram. Now, mind you, Mark Ingram has averaged 9.6 points each of the first 3 weeks of the season. He got 9.6 points exactly each of the first 3 weeks. This week, Ingram's line was 62 all-purpose yards, only put up 8.2 points. However, the guy that he benched, oh my God, Newton went off. 316 yards and 3 passing touchdowns, which you're watching those replays right here, just throwing the ball all over the field. 44 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. I want to say it was something like his 50th rushing touchdown or something. There'll be some fact-checking going on here. He ended the day with 31.4 points on the bench. But fortunately for Jesus Teats MD, he had great performances out of his starting quarterback, his starting wide receiver, and his starting running back. Those 3 roles today just absolutely blew up for him. So let's start with the running back. Devonta Freeman, again, having some really good stuff. He has yet to miss a week without scoring a touchdown. He had 78 all-purpose yards. This score here that you're watching, 14.8 points. Where the fuck am I supposed to park? Jesus Christ. There's just people parked everywhere. There's a Palmer's down the road, and goddamn it, it's fucking 12 o'clock. What the fuck did I expect? So now I'm going to have to fucking walk in the rain all the way down to drop this damn pack. Fuck it. Anyways, let's get on with the recap. So 78 all-purpose yards, a touchdown. He finished 14.8 points. So really good week out of Devonta Freeman. Meanwhile, Dak Prescott, and I'm probably showing you some of his stuff right now because of all that little rant there. Dak Prescott went absolutely bonkers. He finished 20 of 36 passing, had 252 yards throwing the ball, 3 touchdowns. He was finally connecting up with Dez Bryant. I mean, it was really cool to see them actually having some catches and stuff going on. Finished with 20.5 points, so really nice day out of Dak. But the big score for Jesus Teets MD was Jordy Nelson. Thursday night football, Jordy Nelson gets out. Was that Thursday night? I will have some more fact checking going on. Who the fuck cares? Jordy Nelson, 4 touchdowns in the past 2 weeks he's had. He now has 4 touchdowns in just the past 2 weeks. So, of course, 4 receptions, 75 yards, 2 touchdowns, 21.5 points for Jordy Nelson. So, way to go, Jordy Nelson. Now, hopefully I can find a spot to park here and drop this package off without getting too wet. Ooh, I think I just delayed enough. Yeah, here we go. Getting some good parking. All right, y'all. We'll see you in a little bit. Right here. So just dropped the package off. We are now going to head over to, I think, High Vizzle and do a little can and bottle return. But as we start up talking about T.I. Bionic Man and 12 Monkeys matchup, T.I. Bionic Man 79.7 points, 12 Monkeys 117 points for the win. I just want to stress, we've had a lot of crazy shit happen and go down this week. So if at all possible, if we could please take a moment of silence and bow our heads for what used to be T.I. Bionic Man's starting running backs.
Well, a wiser fellow than myself once said, sometimes you eat the bar and much obliged. Sometimes the bar, well, he eats you.
That some kind of Eastern thing?
Far from it.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about that. So a week after this person's monstrous breakout performance, last week they scored 169 all-purpose yards, 25.4 points. It was basically their coming out party to the NFL last week. Dalvin Cook suffered an ACL. Now, fortunately, he did get some points. He had 74 all-purpose yards in this touchdown, put up 11.9 points, but he is now done for the season. Really hard loss for the Vikings and for T.I. Bionic Man. Also, another running back for them, for T.I. Bionic Man, on Sunday Night Football, Chris Carson for the Seattle Seahawks just started to kind of maybe put his foot out there and his head out there saying, maybe I want to be that primary running back. He suffered a fractured leg just below his knee, maybe even also on top of that, a high ankle sprain. So that's going to be a really hard loss for them there, as they just don't have much in the way of running backs in Seattle. Now, fortunately for T.I. Bionic Man, he does get Doug Martin back. Doug Martin was serving a 4-game suspension to start the season. He's coming back now in week 5. On a high note, the Seattle defense was just dominant on Sunday night. They had a fumble and an interception, both returned for touchdowns. They put up 26 points. So, it's going to be a hard road for T.I. Bionic Man. Hopefully we can get stuff worked out there for you. But on to the winning side of the ball, 12 Monkeys. So we're going to start with Travis Kelce. Now, last week we got on Travis Kelce a little bit. He had a 1 reception for basically a 1-yard performance. I mean, a pitiful performance. This week he put up his second 100-plus yard reception with a touchdown performance. Second time this season he's done that. He finished 7 receptions, 111 yards, this touchdown. Also had a key catch towards the beginning of the game. You've probably already seen that recap there. 21.9 points on the day for Travis Kelce, so huge game. Also now we're going to talk about Leonard Fournette. So he entered the week having scored a rushing touchdown in each game he plays. The guy has not played a game in the NFL where he hasn't scored a touchdown. He's only played now 4 games, but entering the week he had 3 rushing touchdowns, 1 each week. This week he got his first receiving touchdown in the NFL with this reception here. He had 86 rushing yards, 4 catches for 59 yards and a touchdown for 22.5 points. Leonard Fournette is now the first Jaguar player to score a touchdown in the first 4 games to open a season. No Jaguars ever done. I mean, there's not very many Jaguars, but I'm surprised like not even Mark Brunell did that. But Leonard Fournette is now the first Jaguar player to open the season with 4 consecutive weeks of touchdowns. Way to go. But also we have to talk about another guy in Florida. For the second week in a row now, Jameis Winston has thrown for over 300 yards and 2 touchdowns, which is awesome to do. So he finished the day 332 yards, 3 total touchdowns for 28.2 points. So really nice job out of Jameis Winston. And Tampa Bay, man, they're going to start turning some heads here, I think, as they start clicking now over the last couple of weeks. Be interesting to see what happens this week. I'm going to be turning up here, heading over to High V. Might get another recap in. We'll have to take a look and see. Well, we just finished up at High V. I collected about $7 worth of cans there. Also picked up some groceries on the way, and now we're gonna head home. I'm gonna do a little cleaning around the house, I think, before Laura gets home. So why don't we, as we're driving through, go ahead and take a look at another recap. This matchup we're gonna look at here is my matchup of Nuxkanuck Moose K's and Lock, Stock, and Doc. Now last week, I said this. I am super stoked, still undefeated this season. Don't know how much longer that's going to be. I probably just jinxed myself. Yep. The jinx was definitely in. As I got the loss, 87.9 points to 100.4 points. This now puts Jared, Lockstock, and Doc squarely in first place, even though we have the same record, 3-1. Not only does he have the win over me, but he also has scored more points. So let's start over on my side of the ball. Now, fortunately for me in the draft this year, I picked up Kareem Hunt, who not only is leading Rookie of the Year votes, I mean, obviously too early to tell, but right now he's definitely leading Rookie of the Year votes. Currently, he is actually the most slippery player to bring down. He currently has for 68% more missed tackles than any other player in the league this season. And you're watching the highlights here. This week he finished, he's now got 3 weeks so far in this 4-week season where he's finished with over 100 yards rushing. This week was no different. 101 yards rushing, 4 receptions for an additional 20 yards, finished with 15.1 points. Another player of mine, we're going to look at my 2 quarterbacks next. Phillip Rivers, every week, the LA Chargers are now 0-4, but every week they're right in the game, and it's mainly because Phillip Rivers is throwing more than anybody else out there. He currently is averaging over 30 pass attempts per game. This past week, 347 yards, 2 touchdowns in a loss. He put up 20 points. Now, Aaron Rodgers this week set all-time season highs with 4 touchdowns. He set a season high in completion percentage of 69%, and he set a season high in QBR at 128 points. And despite shoddy play, especially early on in the game from his offensive line and losing Devontae Adams and Ty Montgomery, he still put up very modest 179 yards, but he had these 4 touchdowns throughout the course of the game. 20.9 points. We already looked at a couple of them with Jordy Nelson, but here's a couple more. Just awesome game from him. Hopefully that'll keep rolling. But on to the winning side of the ball, lock, stock, and dock. I think we're going to start to see a trend. Like I said, I had wrote the script for week 2. We had the video last week, and now we've got this week. And in all 3 of those, his 3 big players were Gurley, Hyde, and Brady. So let's take a look at them. So we're going to start with Carlos Hyde, who is fighting through. Jesus Christ, I'm just sitting here trying to turn left, and there's cars coming from every direction. Looks like I'm watching a fucking ping pong match. Sorry. Back to the recap. Carlos Hyde, fighting through a sore hip, had 5 receptions, 95 all-purpose yards, finished with 12 points. But again, weak Brady. Since the week 1 loss, Brady has now done this 3 times in a row. He's thrown for 300 or more yards, 2 or more touchdowns every week since that week 1 loss. 307 yards this week, 2 touchdowns, put up 18.2 points. I'm just waiting for this fucker to turn left. Now that they've turned left, maybe nope, still not. Fuck. Tom Brady, look at those things. Awesome. But let's go over to Todd Gurley. Holy cow. If he continues at this pace, currently he has 596 all-purpose yards through the first 3 weeks of the season. If he can do that pace, he's going to be setting himself in some very rarefied territory. Each week, he runs and catches more yards and gains more yards through the air and more yards on the ground. This week, 121 rushing yards, 7 catches, an additional 94 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown that you're already watching, 33 points. So it'll be real interesting to see what happens when those 3 players hit their bye week. But I mean, God, if they keep performing like this all season, they're going to be setting some all-time records, and I think Lock, Stock, and Doc is going to be a favorite come playoff time to get his first terrible tendy, golden tendy. So way to go, Lock, Stock, and Doc on the win. Maybe I'll be able to turn left here eventually. If not, you'll probably see me with another recap. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. I'm turning fucking left. Oh my God, it finally happened. Thank you, Jeebus. Ugh. All right, well, why don't we go ahead and take a look at another recap now that I finally turned left and I can finally drive home in the rain here. We're going to look at Vagenda of Manaside versus No Punt Intended. Vagenda of Manaside losing this week, 83.5 points. Still the lone team to not get a win. No Punt Intended, 110.2 points. So we're going to start on Vagenda Manaside. And we're going to start with a really exciting player. This young man used to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. Terrell Pryor Sr. finally got his first touchdown this season as a Redskin with this 44-yard touchdown strike. He finished the day 3 receptions, 70 yards for 15.5 points. Terrell Pryor, I think, man, he's going to have a decent career, I think, as a wide receiver now he finally found his niche. Another player from the same game, Alex Smith, is quietly putting together one of his best seasons in recent memory. As a Chiefs fan, I can attest to that. They are not afraid to throw the ball downfield. He currently is throwing 8 touchdowns this season. He has 9, which we're going to talk about here, and he has yet to throw an interception. Again, I probably just jinxed him for this next season. I'm sorry, Laura, but awesome game. 293 yards. He had a passing touchdown, 56 yards, got his first rushing touchdown of the season on this little option play here. Finished with 22.6 points in a great Monday night game. I got to tell you, that was a great game with the Redskins. But also another quarterback on your team, Russell Wilson, hasn't thrown an interception in 130 straight dropbacks. This week he threw 2 of them. 295 yards, 2 passing touchdowns. He had this amazing run, 38-yard, had this great rushing touchdown, 23.8 points. He did a little bit of everything, but he basically put himself in a hole to try and dig out of. So, I mean, it was a little on his own fault. But on to the winning side, No Punt Intended. Now, despite leaving the game at half, Marcus Mariota had a stat line that most running backs would be envious of. He did have the 2 interceptions, and again, we talked last week, he's going to have to watch that. But he finished with 96 yards through the air, and then on the ground, 39 yards in this awesome run, 2 touchdowns. He had 2 rushing touchdowns, 14.9 points. The jury is still out on him. We'll have to see how he recovers through the rest of the week. He is day-to-day with that hamstring injury. Like we talked, he had to leave at halftime there. Now, the next player, no pun intended, we have to talk about here, the way that the Saints D, that Saints game, the way that the Saints D played, you'd have sworn that they were at home in New Orleans, but they were actually in London. They pitched almost a damn near shutout. It was an impressive defensive effort, but Drew Brees, after a sluggish first half of the start, since the defense kept it close, was able to come out in the second half. He finished with 268 yards, a couple of touchdowns. He had 70% completion rate for the 3rd time this season, and he finished with 17.3 points. So Drew Brees, really good. And for the 2nd week in a row, we are going to bring up Ezekiel Elliott in a big, big way. Elliott has rushed for 80-plus yards and a touchdown. Let me take that back. For the 2nd week in a row, he not only has a rushing touchdown, he has a receiving touchdown with 80 yards on the ground. He did it again this week for the 2nd week in a row. 85 yards rushing with that touchdown. I'm just kind of vamping right now because there's a lot of different highlights you're seeing. 54 reception yards with a receiving touchdown as well. 27.9 points. So I just pulled in here. I've got to take the groceries and stuff inside, get them all put away. And maybe not tonight, maybe tomorrow. You'll see, I think we've only got a couple more recaps left here, so we'll try and hammer those out and get this out to you before the weekend. All right, guys, have a good one.
Now it's time to put away everything that we took out. When the place is nice and clean, it makes us feel so proud.
We always clean up, clean up. To show we really care. We always clean up, clean up. 'Cause we like to do our share.
Hey, my name's Cooper, and your commish wanted me to finish up these recaps while I eat my dinner. So we're gonna look at Buyer's Remorse and Jim Kelly's Little Nipper. So Buyer's Remorse, he finished with 74.9 points. He lost to Jim Kelly's Little Nippers, 137.6. Now let's start with Buyer's Remorse here. So normally, that's really good. That's really good. Normally, a tight end, if he scores 10 points, it's considered a good week. But when you have Rob Gronkowski and he averages about 16 points a game or so, then so that's not always so good. So it's kind of a ho-hum thing for him. He had 4 receptions, 80 yards, and 10 points. So let's take a look now at C.J. Anderson. He had a nice bounce back game this week. 4.8 yards per carry. He had 112 all-purpose yards, 4 receptions, and 13.2 points. And now we're going to look at Eli Manning. Now, for the first time since 2014, Eli Manning had a rushing touchdown. Look at this, but his receivers could still not do this. Not good on the first try. Look at that. Those other ones wouldn't count. They were practice. So Manning ended up 288 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 22 yards on the ground with that rushing touchdown. Like I said, 27.2 points. But see, nobody can catch like on this team. So there you go. There's a catch for you. So let's talk a little bit about Jim Kelly's Little Nippers. He got the win, 137.6 points. Second straight week in a row. Michael Thomas ended with 80 yards, a touchdown, and 18 points. See, that's how good he catches. 8 receptions, 89 yards, touchdown, 18.9 points. Let's look at Kirk Cousins. The Redskins were firing on all cylinders over there on Monday night. Ooh, look at this. I gotta smell this down in here. Oh, it smells real good. So we're going to talk about, you already saw that 44-yard touchdown with Terrell Pryor. Should have had a third touchdown on this late pass here to Josh Doxson, but, he didn't do it. He's just a Doxson. Cousins, did show some of his running prowess. He ended the day with 220 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 38 yards rushing, 21.8 points. And, of course, Le'Veon Bell, he had to get some of his. So, Le'Veon Bell, when they get 25-plus touches to him, Steelers always 19-5. So, it's pretty good for them. This week he had 39 touches. So, they had a pretty good week. 144 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4 receptions for 42 yards, 33.6 points. Pretty good job out of him. And this has been your Cooper recap of the week. I'm going to go sniff my butt.
All right, here, gang. This is the last recap of the week. It's Friday night, soon to be Saturday morning, trying to get this all wrapped up for you. So we're going to take a look at Ambitious But Rubbish versus Big Old TDs. Ambitious But Rubbish getting the win, 115.8 points to Big Old TDs, 98.5 points. Going to start with Big Old TDs. Now, a week removed from his monster 170-yard, 2-touchdown game, this is Stephon Diggs. He took an obvious step back this week. He only had 5 catches, 98 yards, 12.3 points. That was still a pretty good game there as you're getting in on some of his plays here. Now, Odell Beckham Jr. is kind of crazy. Despite dislocating his finger and tweaking his ankle on top of it, still managed to put a productive game together. 7 receptions, 90 yards, 12.5 points. So kind of impressive despite all of his injuries. Should be okay, I would think, moving forward. Now, we talked at the very beginning about Houston. All I got to say is Houston, we do not have a problem at all. Deshaun Watson is turning into an amazing rookie find. He helped to set a franchise record, 57 points in a single game, and he did it with both his arms and his legs. 283 yards and 4 passing touchdowns, 24 yards and a touchdown running the ball. He finished with 32.4 points. Still needs to cut down on the turnovers. He's only had 1 game without 9 interception that he started, but still just an amazing performance. 32.4 points out of him. Over onto the winning side of the ball with Ambitious But Rubbish. After getting double-digit catches last week, A.J. Green did salvage what would have been for him an underwhelming performance. 5 receptions, 63 yards with a touchdown. Most receivers would be okay with that, but he only finished with 14.8 points. Now, typically, if A.J. Green doesn't have a big game, it's really hard to see that Andy Dalton would do anything at all. But this week, he did just that. He got it done. Dalton connected with 9 different receivers and finished as his team's top rusher. Andy Dalton was his top rusher. 286 yards, 4 passing touchdowns, 29 yards on the ground, finished with 26.9 points. So pretty impressive for the Red Rifle there. But let's talk about Lamar Miller now. So entering week 4, Lamar Miller's 49 rushes were the most by any player without a rushing touchdown through 3 weeks. This week, he got his touchdown, 75 yards. His rushing touchdown added 4 catches, 56 yards, and another touchdown. So 2 touchdowns on the week, 27.1 points. It's been a pretty good week. Hopefully you guys are enjoying this one. I'll catch you guys next week. We have a whole new line of recaps. See you then.